What is lost may never be again. In 2020, we said goodbye to one of our most venerable warriors. What could ever take its place? When a time comes, will we be left old and withered, only to reminisce of the good days where the blue beast roamed the forest? What's up guys, this is Andrew at Motorcycles Off-Road. I have a great video for you today. I have been working a while to get a complete comparison of the WR250R versus the Honda CRF300L. Full disclosure, I used to own a WR250R in the past, but I didn't feel that it would have done the bike justice to do a review just on past thoughts and memories alone. As I do with all my comparisons and reviews, I need to get some time on the bike that I'm currently reviewing, and for a comparison video, I'd like to get a back-to-back full comparison. Well, that's exactly what we were able to put together. The venerable WR250 deserves a fleshed out review, so get comfortable. This one might take a while because I'm going to have a lot to talk about here to do this motorcycle justice. And we will see today if the Honda CRF300L can offer a formidable comparison for all the WR250 guys out there. If you've seen any of my other reviews, you know there's a general format I like to stick with to make these videos more clear and concise. The video will be broken down as the following. We will talk about specifications, on-road experience, off-road, looks and aesthetics, specific scenarios and which one might be right for you, and my final thoughts. And I hope that by the end of this review, for one, I earn your sub, and number two, that you can at least see my point of view with both of these motorcycles to give you a good idea for if you're looking to buy one to make a more informed decision. That is my goal here, so let's get into it. First, let's talk about the specifications. Now, I don't want to spend all day boring you guys with specifications, but I did make a list here. I dug up a bunch of data, and I cherry-picked some specifications that a lot of people that are looking to buy a dual sport are concerned with. So let's briefly go through it real quick. And I also did add in the Kawasaki KLX300, because at the time reviewing that bike versus the Honda 300L, as a dual sport, I felt the Kawasaki was my number two. Now keep in mind, my definition for a dual sport is not just a dirt bike that has a motorcycle plate on it. My definition is a motorcycle that you're willing to drive back and forth to work all week long and then hit up some trails and be a weekend warrior. So as far as that category as a true dual sport, I wanted to throw in the Kawasaki as well, because a little bit of spoilers, my top dual sports might actually get switched around a little bit after this review. So anyway, the specifications. Displacement, not very important. I feel it's more so how the bike feels rather than the numbers on the paper, but the one important thing to note is all three bikes are fuel injection. Claimed horsepower. The WR has the most claimed horsepower at 29, the Honda at 27. Now I understand this is a point of contention where some people have said that the Honda does not have 27. I don't know for sure. All I can say is the dyno numbers from 550 Performance with the stock ECU versus my specific ECU flash shows the early dyno numbers of just shy of 27 horsepower and rounded up about 20 foot-pounds of torque. Here's that slide. That's third party. You guys make the decision on your own. I will say though, riding all three of these motorcycles, the Honda definitely has the most low-end torque. It being a stroked motor applies the torque earlier, as well as definitely feels like it has the most. Okay, transmission. All three bikes are 6-speed, although there's an asterisk for the Honda because the Honda handles the transmission slightly different, as it is a first 1 through 5 is very close and 6 is more of an overdrive. Next, it's top speed. I was able to get my Honda at 85 miles per hour. The Yamaha being slightly more, but out of these three bikes, all of them are highway worthy. And if you are really considering long distance on a highway, I would get an ECU flash and add one more tooth to the sprocket of the front, and then you will stay at a low RPMs at highway speeds in any case. So all three of these bikes are very good at that task. All right, next it's wet weight. I've heard time and time again that the Honda 300L is too heavy. We'll talk about that later on my final thoughts, but I will say that if you are really concerned about the difference, the wet weight of the Yamaha is 295 pounds, 134 kilograms, and we're talking a difference of less than 5% across these three motorcycles. I don't think you can feel the 5%. And a lot of the numbers people like to use is the dry weight of the Yamaha versus the wet weight of the Honda, and that just doesn't make any sense. Next, fuel capacity, they're all about the same, close to 9 liters or 2 gallons. The Honda slightly more. Miles per gallon, the Honda wins out at 74. That doesn't mean all too much, but the thing that means the most is total tank range, in my opinion, because you have a lot of guys that ride in places like Australia where they have a long distance to drive before they can even get to where they even want to ride in the first place. The Honda carrying the longest range on a full tank of gas. And this is due basically to how fuel efficient the Honda really is. And also keep in mind, if you are one of those people to go long range for your rides, you could also look into the Rally, which is another version of the 300L. I did a whole video comparing the specifications of these two motorcycles, and you have a ton of range with the Rally having almost double the size fuel tank. But today we're talking about the dual sports, so let's move on. Seat height. I'm 5 foot 10 inches tall, and I would say I'm most comfortable with the Honda and the Kawasaki seat height. Start to feel a little tall with the Yamaha, and it feels like it wears its weight a little high because of that. With the Yamaha being so much taller in the inseam, you only see a fraction of that height when it comes to the ground clearance, which I can say that's kind of surprising. Very little difference in the ground clearance of the Honda 300L and the WR250. Alright, now MSRP. And of course this one has an asterisk for the Yamaha because the Yamaha is basically not being made anymore. 2020 was the last year it was being made. I still feel the best way to do this is to compare the MSRP of the new motorcycle, and the reason being, these things are hard to find used, and when you do find them, people want basically, at least in my area, 7,000 American or at MSRP. And as with all bikes, when you buy them, of course you're going to have to pay your local taxes, your freight, and all that. But this is a good baseline, and the WR costs about $1,500 American more than the 300L, so we'll have to talk about if that extra money was actually worth it. Now, one other thing I wanted to add in here would be service intervals. I wanted to do this because I feel this is very important when establishing what is a true dual sport. You definitely don't want to be checking the valves every other week. All three of these motorcycles have amazing intervals. The Yamaha having the lowest, saying you have to change the oil every 3,000 miles or 4,800 kilometers, but that's still amazing. That's still really good, solid numbers. You're not doing it all that often. And there is the compared specifications and my particular thoughts on each category and what is important when choosing your motorcycle. But let's move on to the next section. On-road experience. Okay, back to back, I can tell you right off the bat, the WR250R is the most pleasurable to ride on the road. It is the bike with the most high rev power range, and it makes the most horsepower. Which makes me wonder how awesome the WR250X was. If you don't know, that was the Supermoto version, and it was only available for a couple years. It was very short-lived in production. My only guess is that Yamaha didn't sell so many, so they figured if we just sold WRs to dual sport, we'd be able to sell more. People wanted the Supermoto, they could just buy the wheels and the brakes themselves, which is true. I never rode one, but they're probably a lot of fun. It would offer great off-road maneuverability, being shorter, wider, heavier tires, touching the ground, giving you more stability. That's a cool bike. I mean, it's almost half tempting to consider buying a WR just to make it a Supermoto. Don't get me wrong, I have no problem crushing miles on Honda 300L. But if I have to pick a clear winner here, WR is just more fun, so it has to take the lead in this category. But as in true dual sport fashion, both motorcycles have hard stock seats, and you feel the thumper vibrations. I will say it's a bit less vibrations on the 300L, and I would guess that's due to newer, better engine counterbalancing, but this sort of vibration is something that you always get with light single-cylinder engines. So that's about really all I need to say on road experience. Now we're going to move into the off-road, so stay tuned. Off-road. Okay, so off-road is a big category for me. I would almost say that comparing these two bikes, the off-road is the most important. Why? Well, because we already established that with either motorcycle, you will be completely fine with a solid commute or drive back and forth to work all week long, not have to worry about service intervals, get good gas mileage, all that. That's all fine. It's very similar between these two motorcycles. But firstly, let's talk about weight. So many people hyper-dramatize the weight of one dual sport over another. With these two, me and many other reviewers will tell you the weight is insignificant, and I've even seen other reviewers say the Honda even feels lighter. I would have to agree, the Honda is balanced better, the WR feels tall, and, well, it is tall. So if you want to make an argument and you're going to use weight, I would have to say your argument has no weight in this category. It's one of those things you notice when you ride the motorcycles back to back. Another big thing is suspension. The WR hands down has better suspension. It has been beat to death by every single reviewer that the Honda CRF300L has soft suspension. If you weigh 180 pounds or more, depending on how you ride and the condition of your off-road surface, you could feel the limitations of this suspension. So that's definitely a plus here for the WR. But to be fair, if you want to consider that the WR comes generally $1,500 more than the 300L, it's an easy remedy. A simple fix is you can use a Thailand company, YSS. You can buy a complete rear shock and spring sprung for your weight for $650 US. And in my research, most people say the front forks are stiff enough that when you replace the rear shock, the front forks feel even better because they're not compensating for the soft rear shock. Let's say the front fork is too soft for your liking as well. You can drop another $123 for a Racetech front spring. If you don't know, only one of the fork tubes has a spring in it. You can add the second spring to even it out, which would still leave you somewhere around $600 to $700 under the price of the WR. And now the Honda suspension would be designed for your workload and weight. Just some devil's advocate to throw out there, just something to think about. So for me, the big tipping point here is the way that both of these engines make power.
You got to stand up and ride that thing a lot.
Yeah.
I lean forward. Yeah, it's 2 inches shorter. This really opens up on the street though.
Oh yeah.
The WR has its power high. Yeah. But you see how low that one is?
Yeah, I was doing like 70, 72, 73. It was telling me to shift to the 7th gear.
Yeah.
The WR makes power high and has high horsepower, whereas the Honda was a 250 that they stroked out, which makes power low with a solid amount of torque. I would have to say the clear winner here is the Honda for off-road. The power it provides is much more useful. You're more likely to grab and climb a hill than to either not have enough power or start wheel spinning. The WR offers a bigger challenge where you have to use more clutch activation, but the significant increase in torque is clear with the 300L.
It just doesn't have that low end, like get out of the hole like mine does.
Now if you ride the 300L, the one that's set up right, because most people like to put a taller knobbier tire on the rear and they lose rear wheel torque. But if they sprocket it right to the correct tire, the Honda is a pleasure to ride in the mud and tight trails. It is balanced well, its torque to weight ratio feels crisp and responsive. Dare I describe the WR250R as gutless? Well, many others have. And on my bike in particular, it's even more noticeable with a big rear sprocket. My performance mod, my bike is just geared low and torquey, and I just don't think you can achieve the same effect with the WR. Keep in mind the WR I rode this time around was not in stock form. Look, if you live in an area with wide open terrain, you might favor the WR. But when it comes to tight trails, sand, heavy clay like mud, the Honda 300L is just the better tool for the task. Looks and aesthetics. So the whole looks thing is subjective, so I'll make this one quick. We can look at both bikes in their stock form side by side to compare, and I would have to say the Honda looks just a lot better, a lot more sharp. WR has an older bike look, because it is. Very basic radiator shrouds, more rounded front fender. Also, I've never been a fan of the silver rims. Hondas are black stock, and the black rims look amazing when you add decals. Even the goofy round mirrors that come on the WR stock look out of place to me. I like how their newer bikes have more of a sharp, aggressive shape, and honestly, they're all around a lot more useful. Though I took mine off straight away for a nice little off-road one. But if we're being nitpicky here, it's just something to point out. But as I said, it's all subjective, and honestly, second rate when it comes to the performance for whatever you need this motorcycle for. So who are these motorcycles for? Who would benefit over owning one than the other? It's kind of hard to say. See, because if you're a beginner rider, I wouldn't recommend you the WR, but if you're an advanced rider, I probably wouldn't recommend you the WR. Now there is something to be said that if you can get a really good deal used, the WR could be a fantastic bike. But if you're paying upwards of $7,000 for this motorcycle, it might just be better to look elsewhere. But I will say I do understand completely why so many people love this motorcycle. So think about the prime of the WR250R. What was its competition? Well, you could argue that the DRZ 400, which is one of the best dual sports ever made, could be a good competition. But it's heavier, it's just as tall, it's carb rated, and it only has a 5-speed transmission. So that point, it's kind of a toss-up. Maybe you would want the WR, sacrifice the low-end torque and horsepower that the DR offers just for the extra features that the WR has. Okay, what's his other competitions? The KLX250? Well, it's definitely a superior machine to the KLX250. It has more power, higher ground clearance, even a better display. Let's say the WR beats that. Alright, the Honda CRF300L? Not a chance. When I did the review versus the Honda CRF300L versus the 300L, it was clear how many differences they changed from one of these motorcycles to the other. They're almost not even in the same category. The WR offers a completely different motorcycle than the 250L. The 250L, the one thing it has going for it is reliability, but the WR is also reliable. It's more capable, better suspension. It's almost in every single way a better motorcycle. So this is why you have so many people that love the WR, because for the longest time, a span of nearly 20 years, this thing was just the best low service interval weekend warrior dual sport you could get. But now the market is starting to change. There's a lot more challengers on the horizon, and Yamaha took it off the market because they're probably building something pretty fantastic currently. So when you ask me who this motorcycle is for, well, it's for the guy that wants to get out there, do all the things that they would on any other dual sport if you can find it at a good price. It's also for the person that wants to do more road riding than anything else, or if you would like to convert it to a supermoto. Those are the areas where I feel like the WR is good. When it comes to the Honda, you're getting, in my opinion, arguably a better transmission, a slipper clutch, a far better display with fuel indicator and gear indicator, a more balanced bike, a more beginner-friendly bike, lower seat height, arguably a more aesthetically pleasing bike. So there's a lot of benefits of the 300L. And at this point, honestly, both of these bikes are just about as rare as each other because not many people can get their hands on the 300L, and the WR, there's not many of them around and people are holding on to them or want astronomical price. So it's hard to say. Final thoughts. Okay, so my final thoughts on these two motorcycles. Well, obviously, if you've been listening thus far, I do have a clear winner in my head. Now, I have to be fair and say that when I had my WR, the other motorcycles I had kind of outshined it, and for the wrong reasons. See, I was a different rider back then, and I had the DR350S, which I loved as my dual sport, and I had a KX250 two-stroke, which I loved for strictly off-road. In my opinion, if I was going to sacrifice the higher height, I wanted something with a lot more power just to rip through stuff. And if you're going off-road only, obviously the KX250 is an extreme example of a capable off-road motorcycle. And then for the street legal stuff, which was still on and off-road, I just felt more comfortable on my DR350S. It's a 6-speed transmission, it weighs the exact same, has more power. So those two bikes together outshine my WR. I was probably a little bit too early in my riding career of dual sports to really appreciate what the WR was, because I came from a heavy off-road background. Now, if you're looking for a commuter to drive back and forth to work, and you can find yourself a cheap WR and put a big fuel tank on it, then you're going to have a really good time with that, assuming you're not short. But all in all, I just think the newer motorcycles just have a lot to offer, and I'll have to change my top 3, because honestly, after riding the WR now, I kind of feel that I would put that right under the Honda, maybe in front of the KLX300, because all of which have great service intervals, all of which are good on-road and off-road. But this last time riding the WR was just fun. It's kind of a toss-up, and it really depends on which price you can get for what bike and your situation, etc. But at the end of the day, I'm happy with the Honda CRF300L, especially the way I have mine built. But I do feel that Yamaha is going to come back in a year or two with a mini Tenere, T300, whatever they want to call it, and it's going to be an amazing bike. And that's going to be something I own, and I'll have it here on the channel. I even told my salesman, as soon as you hear word of something like this, just assume I have one on reserve, call me first, because I'll be picking that thing up the day they get it. And if it has any bit of the innovation that they put into the years developing the Tenere 700, then we're talking about a fantastic motorcycle. One that very well could be the unicorn of dual sport bikes for a lot of people. So stay tuned for that. And if you watch this long, let me know in the comments below. I'm going to throw you a heart because you guys are my true fans, and thank you for the support. We hit over 9,000 subscribers. That's amazing. It's less than a year, and the channel has grown pretty well. So I appreciate all you guys. I got new things coming on the horizon that I'll be talking about soon. A lot of things that I'm excited about. So my name is Andrew. This is Motorcycles Off-Road, and stay safe out there, guys. Thanks for watching.